7:17. There's been another massive information breach. Boy, these things keep happening. Uber, this one's a little different. Uber reportedly paid hackers $100,000 to cover up the cyber attack that exposed the personal data of 57 million people. Apparently, it happened in 2016, and we're just learning about it now. Joining us to talk a little more about this is cybersecurity expert Shawn Tuma, an attorney with Scheef and Stone. Good morning, Shawn.
Good morning.
So why are we hearing about this now? Obviously, they tried to cover it up.
Yeah, Uber, here a few weeks ago, we were thinking Equifax really made a mess of things, and now we see Uber try to actually cover it up. And this takes it to a whole new level of a poor way to handle an incident such as this and really blow it into something much bigger than it probably should have been. And, paying hackers to try to cover up the fact that they had penetrated your data and stolen your data is about as bad as you can imagine, because hackers love to extort companies.
Yeah, that's giving them carte blanche to continue doing what they're doing. Is there anything illegal about Uber paying them $100,000?
Well, paying them $100,000, no. That's part of an extortion type campaign that we see hackers doing, and it's not uncommon for companies to pay them. And that part there is not illegal, but failing to notify and report of an incident such as this when you have a duty to do so is absolutely illegal under the laws of many states, in other countries and federal laws as well.
Uber is saying that since they paid off the hackers deleted any information that they obtained. How can we be sure of that?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, they're hackers, they're thieves, they're criminals. They did something illegal in the first place. So are you now taking their word that they have deleted this information and aren't going to try to use it for yet another way to make money? It's hard to imagine.
But the size of this isn't as big as maybe an Equifax, which had 143 million. Target had 110 million back in 2013. There was a breach of LinkedIn of 100 million people. This stands at 57 million. And it sounds like people's social security numbers and credit cards weren't compromised. It was more just their names and their email addresses.
That's right. There was 57 million Uber riders, which is a large number, and then 7 million drivers. But it's not the numbers like you're just talking about. And the other factor is the type of data that was stolen is not the hypersensitive type of data, that we see in a lot of these breaches. So looking at those facts, this didn't have to be a really nasty type of a breach response. It could have been handled in a lot better of a way. But the fact that they tried to hide it and cover it up and not disclose it is what's going to take, the limelight over everything else. That's what people are going to see, and it's going to blow up in a way, I believe, that is much worse than it should have been.
It sounds like this happened on the watch of the former CEO of Uber, and the current CEO says this is just unacceptable.
Yeah, it was the former CEO who was at the helm, and also the chief security officer who had been a former federal prosecutor. And I'm sure what they were thinking is, looking very technically at the information that was taken, they were trying to read it in a very favorable way and say, maybe we don't have a duty to disclose, because it wasn't what we generally consider as the more sensitive personal information, like Social Security numbers or birth dates or things like that. But it just goes to show you how the PR backlash you get when you try to cover something up. And so it's also worth noting the in-house counsel, their legal counsel, who was part of this, has now left the company as well.
This kind of makes you think, all right, if Uber has done this, how many other companies out there have done the same thing?
I can tell you I've had quite a few contact me, because this is the kind of work I do, is counseling companies through these type of incidents. And when I tell them we have to notify, many times they'll never contact me again, because they don't want to hear that. They want someone to tell them what they want to hear. and help them cover it up. And so I think there's probably more out there than we recognize.
Really? So you've had companies that say they don't even want to deal with you because you told them the right thing to do, and they don't want to hear that.
Sure. Whenever they call and I tell them the process and what lies ahead, I'll usually hear something like, yeah, well, I have a brother-in-law who has a friend who's an attorney that said we don't have to do this. We're going to talk to them.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, companies are still reluctant to come forward. And I mean, it's not something favorable. It's not something you want to do as a company, but the laws require you to do it. And we have agencies such as the Texas Attorney General, the Attorney General of other states, as well as the Federal Trade Commission that have become, fairly aggressive in enforcing these.
Well, it seems like the information that was exposed here wasn't totally sensitive because no social security numbers. If someone has your email address, they could send you a phishing scam that you could accidentally click on, and then people could get some information, maybe your passwords and things like that. So how can we keep our information safe?
Well, you're exactly right. That's the value of an email address. And really, it's hard for us to keep our information safe because it's third parties who are losing our information. And so if they have it, we're at risk. But what we need to do is obviously be careful who we deal with, who we supply our information to. But that's not a surefire way to handle it either, because these are reputable companies. You would think that would take proper precautions. The real thing we have to do, Amy, is we have to protect ourselves beyond just not sharing our information. And that's through education of basic cyber hygiene that's become a part of life in today's modern society. And that's things like learn to spot phishing emails, look for them, be paranoid about clicking on links and opening attachments, even when you think you know who they're coming from. Because what these criminals could do is create clone emails that look like an Uber email. And then send it to you. You think you're getting an email from Uber. You click on the link because they know you do business with Uber. And so be careful when you're clicking on links. Hover over the link and make sure it's leading to where you would expect it to go.
That's why I never follow links from emails. If they tell me that I need to do something or whatever, I'll just type in the link myself to the known address that I know it is.
That's such a good practice. And if people would do that, they don't realize most of the data breaches we see from larger companies start with an email attack like that. And that's how hackers first get their way in and begin doing what they do, is through an email, through a phishing attack. And if people could learn to spot that, it would stop a whole lot of these from happening, as well as a lot of our own personal identity theft and fraud.
Well, Shawn, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Shawn Tuma, attorney with Scheef and Stone.